I'm Brooke Williams, 29 years old, and I saved for an entire year to gift my parents a dream vacation for their 35th anniversary. I meticulously planned every detail of our trip to the Outer Banks, excited to create lasting memories with my family. Then came that devastating phone call. The beach house was amazing, my mom gushed. Confused, I asked when they were leaving for the trip. Oh, honey, the whole family went last week. Her casual words shattered my heart into 1,000 pieces. How could my own family take the vacation I paid for without me? Our relationship has always been complicated, but this betrayal cut deeper than anything before. Before I tell you how I discovered my family went on the vacation I paid for without me, let me know where you're watching from. Hit subscribe if you've ever felt betrayed by those closest to you, and stick around to see how I finally learned to stand up for myself. Growing up as the middle child between my older sister Allison and younger brother Mason was never easy. Our family dynamic followed the classic middle child syndrome perfectly. I was neither the accomplished firstborn nor the babied youngest. Instead, I was caught in that awkward middle position, constantly seeking approval and validation that always seemed just out of reach. My parents, Diana and Richard Williams, were high school sweethearts who married young and built a comfortable life in suburban Massachusetts. My father worked his way up in banking while my mother taught elementary school. They weren't wealthy, but we always had what we needed. What our household lacked wasn't material things, but rather emotional awareness. My parents came from that generation that believed providing financially was enough. Discussing feelings wasn't their strong suit. Allison, 32, followed in Dad's footsteps into finance and became his obvious favorite. She married young, bought a house in the same neighborhood as our parents, and generally met all their traditional expectations. Mason, 26, became Mom's clear favorite as the baby of the family. Despite his tendency to drift between jobs and relationships, his charm and humor always earned him easy forgiveness for any shortcomings. And then there was me. I worked hard to carve my own path, moving to Boston after college and building a career as a marketing manager for a tech company. I was doing well professionally, had my own apartment, and had created a life I was proud of. Yet family gatherings always left me feeling like the odd one out, like I was speaking a different language than the rest of them. Our family vacations had always been significant markers in our lives. When we were kids, my parents would save all year for our annual week at the beach. As we grew older and busier, these trips became less frequent but more meaningful. The last time we'd all vacationed together was 5 years ago, before Mason went to college. Those beach trips were some of the only times I felt truly connected to my family, perhaps because away from their normal routines, my parents seemed more relaxed, more present. When their 35th anniversary approached, I wanted to recreate that connection. I remembered how they'd always talked about visiting the Outer Banks, but had never made it happen. The idea came to me during a particularly nostalgic holiday dinner. I would give them the vacation they'd always wanted, and we could all be together again. The financial sacrifice was significant on my marketing manager's salary. I'm not poor by any means, but Boston isn't cheap, and setting aside enough money meant real changes to my lifestyle. I canceled my gym membership and worked out at home. I cooked instead of ordering takeout. I skipped happy hours with colleagues and turned down weekend trips with friends. I even took on freelance projects on weekends, writing content for small businesses to supplement my income. Over the course of a year, I managed to save $4,200, enough for a week in a beachfront rental that could accommodate all of us. It was the most expensive gift I'd ever given, representing countless small sacrifices and extra hours of work. But whenever I felt tempted to spend that money elsewhere, I'd imagine the look on my parents' faces when I presented them with the gift, and it made every sacrifice worthwhile. I called Allison and Mason to see if they wanted to contribute, thinking it might be nice for the gift to come from all of us. Allison explained that between her mortgage and her son's preschool tuition, she couldn't spare the cash. Mason simply said he was a little tight right now, though his Instagram showed him at a concert the following weekend. I told them both it was fine, that I was happy to cover it myself. The truth was, I wanted this to be my gift. I wanted my parents to see that I was successful enough, thoughtful enough, to do something this significant for them. Maybe then they'd look at me with the same pride they showed when talking about Allison's promotion or Mason's latest adventure. Maybe then I'd finally feel like I belonged in this family as much as my siblings did. As I finalized the booking and received the confirmation email, I felt a swell of pride. This vacation would be different. This would be the trip where they finally saw me, really saw me. I printed out a beautiful card with all the details and wrapped it in a box with some beach-themed items, sunscreen, flip-flops, a beach novel for my mom. I couldn't wait to give it to them at their anniversary dinner. For once, I wasn't just the middle child trying to keep up. I was the daughter who had done something extraordinary, something neither of my siblings had managed to do. The thought filled me with a satisfaction I rarely felt in my family role. Little did I know that this gift, meant to bring us closer, would instead reveal just how disconnected we truly were. Planning the perfect family vacation became my passion project. Every lunch break and evening after work, I researched rentals until I found the perfect 3-bedroom beach house in Avon, North Carolina. It had a wraparound deck with ocean views, a fully equipped kitchen for family meals, and was just steps from the beach. The photos showed sunlight streaming through large windows and comfortable furniture where we could gather in the evenings. I could already picture us there, Dad grilling on the deck, Mom reading in the hammock, all of us playing board games at night. Finding dates that worked for everyone was the next challenge. I created a group text with my parents and siblings to discuss timing. After numerous back and forths about work schedules and commitments, we settled on July 15th to 22nd. I confirmed multiple times to make sure everyone was on board before making the non-refundable booking. Are we absolutely certain about these dates? I texted the group. Once I book, we're locked in. Works for us, Dad replied. Perfect for me, wrote Mom. I'll be there, Mason confirmed. We'll make it work, Allison responded. With everyone's confirmation, I placed the booking in February, paying the full amount up front to secure the property during peak season. The rental company sent a detailed confirmation email with check-in procedures, local recommendations, and house rules, which I forwarded to everyone. It's official, I wrote. Can't wait for our family beach week in July. For the anniversary dinner itself, I researched restaurants near my parents' home and made a reservation at Belvedere, an upscale Italian place they'd mentioned wanting to try. I planned to present them with the vacation gift there, along with a custom photo album I'd created. The album took weeks to design, featuring photos from our past family vacations alongside blank pages for the upcoming trip. On the cover, I had embossed Williams' family memories, past, present, and future. Inside the front cover, I wrote a heartfelt message about how much their marriage had inspired me and how grateful I was to be their daughter. Looking back, that sentiment feels painfully ironic now. As July approached, I checked in regularly with everyone about the trip. Dad asked about fishing charters, so I researched options and sent him information. Mom mentioned wanting to visit the Cape Hatteras Lighthouse, so I found out about tours and opening hours. I even created a shared document with packing suggestions, local restaurants, and activities everyone might enjoy. You're really going all out on this, Brooke, Allison commented during one of our calls. I want it to be special, I replied. It's been so long since we've all been together like this. 2 weeks before the trip, a complication arose at work. Our team was pitching a major new client, and my boss asked me to take the lead on the presentation scheduled for July 15th. The day we were supposed to leave for the Outer Banks. There's no way to reschedule? I asked, feeling my heart sink. This client specifically requested to meet with you after seeing your work on the Henderson campaign, my boss explained. It would be a huge opportunity for you and the company. I was torn between professional obligation and personal commitment. After much deliberation, I called my parents to explain the situation. I might have to join you all a day late, I said. There's this really important presentation I can't get out of, but I'll drive down right after and be there by dinner on the 16th. Oh honey, do what you need to do, Mom said. We understand how important your job is. Don't worry about it, Dad added. We'll save the big family dinner for when you arrive. I felt guilty but relieved by their understanding. I messaged the family group. Slight change of plans. I'll be joining you on day 2 because of work. but I'll bring champagne to make up for it. Everyone responded with supportive messages, telling me not to worry and that they understood. Mason even joked, "More bacon for me at breakfast." It seemed like a minor hiccup in an otherwise perfect plan. The week before the trip, I threw myself into preparation, both for the work presentation and for the vacation. I stayed late at the office each night working on my pitch, then came home to finalize vacation details. I purchased sunscreen, new beach towels, and even a waterproof case for my phone so I could take photos without worry. I ordered a delivery of groceries to arrive at the beach house shortly after my family would check in, saving them the hassle of shopping upon arrival. The night before they were supposed to leave, I called my parents to wish them a good trip. "Drive safely tomorrow," I said. "Text me when you arrive so I know you made it okay." "We will," Mom promised. "Can't wait to see that beautiful beach house you found for us." "And Brooke," Dad added, "thank you again for this gift. It means a lot to your mother and me." I hung up feeling warm with anticipation. Despite having to join them a day late, everything was coming together perfectly. The vacation I'd dreamed of and saved for was about to become reality. If only I'd known then what was actually happening behind the scenes. The morning of July 15th arrived with unexpected good news. The client had called to reschedule our presentation to the following week due to a conflict on their end. I was ecstatic. I could join my family from day one after all. I immediately texted my boss to confirm the change, then rushed home to throw my already packed suitcase in the car. As I drove, I called my parents, eager to tell them I'd be arriving just a few hours after them instead of a full day later. "Mom, great news. The presentation got rescheduled. I'm on my way now," I said when she answered, unable to contain my excitement. There was a pause on the other end of the line. "On your way where, honey?" The question confused me. "To the Outer Banks, of course. I can make it for the first day after all." Another pause, longer this time. Then came the words that stopped my world. "Oh, Brooke, we're back home already. The whole family went last week." I actually pulled my car to the side of the road, certain I'd misheard her. "What do you mean last week? We're supposed to be going today. July 15th. "No, dear. We changed it to July 8th. Don't you remember? Mason's wife Nancy couldn't make the original dates because of a work conference." My mind raced, trying to make sense of what I was hearing. Nancy couldn't make it? When was this discussed? I had no memory of any date change, no emails, no texts. "Mom, I paid for a beach house rental July 15th to 22nd. That's today. How could you all have gone last week?" Allison handled changing the reservation, she explained, her voice growing defensive. "We thought you knew. You've been so busy with work lately." I felt dizzy, like the ground was shifting beneath me. "So you're telling me that my entire family went on the vacation I paid for, without me? You said yourself you had that important presentation." My father's voice suddenly interjected. He must have been listening on another phone. "We didn't want to interfere with your career." I ended the call abruptly, telling them I needed to check something. With shaking hands, I pulled up my email on my phone. There it was, my original booking confirmation for July 15th to 22nd. No updates, no changes, nothing. I checked my text messages next, scrolling through our family group chat. There was no mention of date changes there either. I called the rental company directly. The customer service representative confirmed what I already knew in my gut to be true. "Yes, Ms. Williams, the reservation was changed from July 15th, 22 to July 8th, 15. The request came through on June 10th from an Allison Williams, who provided the booking number and security code from the original confirmation email. My sister had used the information from the confirmation email I'd shared with everyone to change the dates, without telling me. And somehow, everyone in my family had known about this change except me. I called Allison next, my voice shaking with anger and hurt. "How could you change the reservation without telling me?" I demanded when she answered. "We did tell you," she responded defensively. "It was discussed in that dinner at Mom and Dad's back in June. You were on your phone most of the time, probably working as usual. We all assumed you were fine with it since you didn't object." I had no recollection of any such discussion. Had I really been that distracted? Even if I had missed something during a family dinner, wouldn't someone have made sure to confirm such a major change with me directly? But Allison, I paid for this trip. The whole thing. How could you all just go without me? Look, Nancy couldn't make it on the original dates, and those were the only days that worked for her. We didn't think it was fair to exclude Mason's wife. Her tone was dismissive, as if I was overreacting. Besides, you said yourself you had that big presentation. We were being considerate of your work commitments. Next, I called Mason, hoping for a different response, perhaps some acknowledgement of how wrong this was. "Oh man, you missed a great trip," he said, seemingly oblivious to my distress. "The weather was perfect every day." Mason, did it occur to any of you that maybe the person who paid for the entire vacation should have been consulted about changing the dates? "I thought you knew," he replied lamely. "Anyway, you're always saying how busy you are with work. We figured you'd be relieved not to have to take time off." I hung up and sat in my car, tears streaming down my face. On impulse, I opened Instagram, where I was greeted by dozens of photos from my family's beach vacation. There was Dad grilling on the deck I'd seen in the rental photos. Mom reading in the hammock. Allison, her husband, and their son building sandcastles. Mason and Nancy toasting with cocktails at sunset. All of them together, smiling, laughing, enjoying the vacation I had sacrificed so much to give them. The final blow came when I noticed the caption on one of Mason's photos, "Thanks for the amazing family vacation. Best gift ever." As if it had been a collective gift, not something I alone had saved for and planned. I made it to the office bathroom just in time to lock myself in a stall before completely breaking down. I cried until I had no tears left, my body shaking with sobs. The betrayal was so complete, so thoughtless, that I couldn't process it. My colleague Rachel found me there an hour later, eyes swollen, makeup ruined. She listened as I poured out the whole story, her expression changing from shock to outrage on my behalf. "Brooke, that's not just inconsiderate, it's cruel," she said when I finished. And the fact that none of them seemed to realize how wrong it was makes it even worse. "Maybe I am overreacting," I said, repeating the doubt my family had planted. "Maybe I should have been paying better attention." "Stop that right now," Rachel interrupted firmly. "You paid thousands of dollars for a family vacation, and they went without you. There is no universe in which that's okay. And trying to make you think you're overreacting? That's gaslighting, pure and simple." Rachel's validation was like oxygen when I'd been drowning. For the first time, I allowed myself to feel the full force of my anger, my hurt, my humiliation. This wasn't just a miscommunication or an oversight. This was a fundamental betrayal by the people who were supposed to love me most. "What are you going to do?" Rachel asked as she helped me clean up my face. "I don't know yet," I answered honestly. "But I can't let this go. Not this time." As I drove home that evening, the shock began to give way to clarity. This incident wasn't an anomaly. It was the culmination of a lifetime of being overlooked, taken for granted, and dismissed. And for the first time, I wasn't going to smile and pretend it was okay. The drive to my parents' house the next day felt like marching into battle. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white, and despite the summer heat, I felt cold all over. I'd barely slept, rehearsing what I wanted to say over and over, trying to find words that would make them understand the magnitude of their betrayal. I pulled into their familiar driveway at 6 p.m., right around dinner time. I hadn't announced I was coming, but their cars were there, along with Allison's SUV and Mason's motorcycle. Of course, they were all together again. The irony wasn't lost on me. Mom answered the door, her smile faltering when she saw my expression. "Brooke, we weren't expecting you. Come in, we were just about to have dinner." I stepped inside to find everyone gathered in the dining room. Dad carving a roast, Allison setting the table, Mason and Nancy lounging with pre-dinner drinks. A normal family dinner. As if nothing had happened. "Brooke," Dad called out. "Perfect timing. I'll get another plate." I remained standing in the doorway, unable to slip into the charade. "I didn't come for dinner. I came for an explanation." The room fell silent. For pairs of eyes avoided meeting mine. "Honey, we explained yesterday," Mom finally said, her voice gentle as if speaking to a child having a tantrum. "There was a scheduling conflict, and we had to change the dates." Without telling me, I added. "Without consulting me. The person who paid for everything." Dad put down the carving knife. "Brooke, sit down. You're being dramatic. No, I won't sit down, I replied, surprising myself with my firmness. What you all did was wrong, and I need you to acknowledge that. Allison sighed loudly. We've been over this. We discussed changing the dates at dinner last month. It's not our fault if you were too busy with work to pay attention. Even if that's true, which I don't remember at all, don't you think such a major change deserved more than a passing mention? A text? An email? Anything to make sure I knew? Mason jumped in. Look, Nancy couldn't make it on the original dates because of her work conference. What were we supposed to do? I turned to Nancy, who at least had the decency to look uncomfortable. I'm sorry about your conflict, Nancy. But there were other solutions. You could have gone later in the summer. Or you could have gone without Nancy. I turned back to my family. Or you could have just gone on the dates we all agreed to in the first place, which would have included me, the person who made the whole thing possible. You're being selfish, Allison snapped. Nancy is family too. And what am I? I asked, my voice breaking despite my best efforts. Because right now, I don't feel like family at all. My mother approached me, reaching for my hand. Of course you're family, sweetie. We brought you back a souvenir. It's a lovely seashell wind chime for your apartment. The casual offer of a trinket as compensation for excluding me from my own gift was so absurd I almost laughed. A souvenir? Mom, I don't want a souvenir from the vacation I paid for but wasn't allowed to attend. Allowed? Dad's voice rose. No one said you weren't allowed. We changed the dates, and you were welcome to join us. How was I supposed to join you when I didn't know you'd changed the dates? I countered. And why was Nancy's schedule prioritized over mine? The silence that followed was telling. They had no good answer. The truth is, I continued, none of you thought about me at all. You saw an opportunity for a free vacation and took it, without considering my feelings or the sacrifice I made to give you this gift. Sacrifice. Allison scoffed. You have a good job in the city. It's not like you're struggling. That's when I lost it. I saved for a year. I gave up things, took extra work, all to make this happen. This wasn't some casual expense for me. It was the most expensive gift I've ever given anyone. And you all treated it like it meant nothing. My voice had risen to a shout, something I never did in my parents' house. Everyone looked shocked. Brooke, my father said sternly, you're being dramatic as usual. It was a misunderstanding, that's all. There's no need to make such a scene. Those words, dramatic as usual, hit me like a slap. How many times had my feelings been dismissed with those exact words? How many times had I swallowed my hurt because expressing it made me dramatic? A misunderstanding is forgetting to pass along a phone message, I said quietly. This was a deliberate decision to exclude me from something I created and paid for. And none of you can even admit it was wrong. I looked around at their faces, defensive, uncomfortable, but not remorseful. Not truly sorry for the pain they'd caused me. In that moment, I realized that nothing I could say would make them understand. They didn't see me, had never really seen me. I need to go, I said, turning toward the door. Don't leave like this, Mom pleaded. Stay for dinner. We can talk more. I shook my head. I'm not hungry, and I don't think there's anything left to say. As I walked out, I heard my father's voice behind me. She'll get over it. She always does. And that was perhaps the most painful realization of all. They expected me to get over it, to forgive and forget as I always had before. They were counting on me falling back into my familiar role, the peacemaker, the one who never made waves, who accepted whatever scraps of attention they offered. But as I drove away from my childhood home that evening, I knew with absolute certainty that this time would be different. This time, I wouldn't just get over it. This time, something fundamental had changed. For the next week, I went into hibernation mode. I called in sick to work for the first time in years, something my perfectionist self would never normally do. I turned off my phone, unplugged from social media, and retreated into the safety of my apartment. The only person I allowed in was Rachel, who brought groceries and sat with me in patient silence when I couldn't find words for my pain. The messages piled up, texts from Mom asking if I was okay, a voicemail from Dad telling me to stop this nonsense, check-ins from Mason and Allison that felt more obligatory than concerned. I couldn't bring myself to respond to any of them. What was there to say when they still didn't understand what they'd done? On the third day of my self-imposed isolation, my best friend Jenna let herself in with the spare key I'd given her years ago. She took one look at me, unwashed hair, sweatpants I'd been wearing for days, the fortress of delivery food containers surrounding my couch, and immediately went into action mode. "Shower," she ordered, pulling me up from the couch. "Now. I'll make coffee and clean up this biohazard zone." 45 minutes later, freshly showered and wearing clean clothes, I sat across from Jenna at my small kitchen table, cradling a mug of coffee between my hands. "Rachel filled me in," she said. "I would have come sooner, but I was on that business trip to Chicago." "It's okay," I said, my voice hoarse from days of crying and barely speaking. "No, it's not okay. None of this is okay, Brooke. What your family did was absolutely shitty." Hearing someone else say it so plainly loosens something in my chest. They don't even think they did anything wrong. They think I'm overreacting. Being dramatic as usual, as my dad put it. Jenna had known me since college, had seen firsthand how I constantly sought my family's approval and how rarely I received it. "You know what this reminds me of?" she asked. "Remember your college graduation?" I winced at the memory. My parents had arrived late, missing my department's awards ceremony where I'd received honors. They'd blamed traffic, but later I discovered they'd come early to have lunch with Allison, who lived nearby, and simply lost track of time. I'd swallowed my hurt then, too. "Or your 30th birthday last year?" Jenna continued. "When they canceled at the last minute because Mason had surprise tickets to that basketball game?" The pattern was undeniable when laid out like this. Time and again, I had been an afterthought to my own family. And time and again, I had made excuses for them, blamed myself, or simply accepted the scraps of attention they were willing to give me. "Why do I keep doing this to myself?" I asked, tears forming again. "Why do I keep expecting things to be different?" "Because they're your family," Jenna answered simply. "We're programmed to seek our parents' approval, to want their love. It's not your fault they've failed to give you what you deserve." Over the next few days, as I began to emerge from my initial shock and hurt, I started to analyze the pattern with clearer eyes. I dug out old journals, reading entries from years past about family disappointments I'd tried to rationalize away. I made lists of incidents when my needs had been dismissed, my accomplishments minimized, my presence treated as optional. The evidence was overwhelming and painful to confront. This wasn't just about a vacation. This was about a lifetime of being the family member who mattered least. I'd always blamed myself. I wasn't achieving enough, wasn't visiting enough, wasn't communicating enough. But looking at the full picture, I had to acknowledge an uncomfortable truth. I had been trying so hard for so long to earn a place of equal value in my family, and it had never worked. No achievement, no gift, no sacrifice had ever been enough to make them see me as they saw each other. By the end of the week, I felt ready to venture out again. I returned to work, grateful for the distraction of normal responsibilities. Rachel checked in on me regularly, and Jenna texted daily affirmations that sometimes made me roll my eyes, but always made me smile a little too. I also made an appointment with Dr. Mitchell, a therapist I'd seen briefly after a bad breakup a few years earlier. In her calm, sunlit office, I poured out the whole story, not just of the vacation, but of the lifelong pattern it represented. "What you're describing sounds like a family dynamic where you've been cast in a specific role," she observed after listening intently. "The accommodating one, the one who adjusts to everyone else's needs while your own are overlooked." "But why me?" I asked. "What did I do to deserve this role?" "It's rarely about deserving," she explained. "Family dynamics often form early and unconsciously. Once patterns are established, they become self-reinforcing. The more you accommodated, the more they expected accommodation. The more you accepted unequal treatment, the more normal it seemed to everyone, including, unfortunately, to you. So I enabled this," I said, the realization both troubling and oddly empowering. "You participated in a dynamic that wasn't serving you," Dr. Mitchell corrected gently. "But recognizing that gives you the power to change it." "How?" "They don't listen when I try to explain how I feel." "The change begins with you, not them. You need to decide what you'll accept and what you won't. You need to establish boundaries and maintain them, even when it's uncomfortable. Even when they push back." We spent the remainder of the session discussing what healthy boundaries might look like in my family situation. Not cutting them off entirely, which wasn't what I wanted, but no longer accepting the unacceptable either. This won't be easy, Dr. Mitchell warned as our time ended. When you change the role you've been playing, everyone else will resist. They're comfortable with things as they are. But if you stay consistent, one of two things will happen. Either they'll adjust to the new dynamic, or you'll gain clarity about whether this relationship can be healthy for you. I left her office feeling both nervous and resolute. For the first time, I was seeing my family situation not as something I had to endure, but as something I had the power to change. That evening, I sat down and drafted an email to my parents and siblings. I decided not to send it yet, giving myself time to refine my thoughts. But the act of putting my feelings into words, of articulating the boundaries I needed, felt like the first step toward healing, not just from this particular hurt, but from years of accepting less than I deserved. After 2 weeks of limited contact with my family, punctuated only by brief texts letting them know I was okay but needed space, I finally felt ready for a real conversation. I had spent those weeks working with Dr. Mitchell on setting boundaries, processing my feelings, and preparing for the inevitable pushback. I texted the family group, "I'd like to have a conversation about what happened. Can we meet Sunday at 2 p.m. at Mom and Dad's?" The responses came quickly, everyone agreeing to be there. I couldn't tell if they were eager to resolve things or just wanted to move past the awkwardness, but at least they were willing to show up. I prepared meticulously for this meeting, writing out key points I wanted to make, anticipating their likely responses, and practicing maintaining my composure even if things got heated. Dr. Mitchell had suggested I bring a small object to hold as a grounding tool if emotions threatened to overwhelm me. I chose a smooth stone from a beach trip I'd taken with friends last summer, a reminder that I had people in my life who valued me properly. Sunday arrived, and I found myself once again driving to my parents' house, though with a very different energy than the last time. Instead of raw anger, I felt a calm determination. This wasn't about making them feel guilty or extracting apologies, though both would be appropriate. This was about establishing a new dynamic going forward. Everyone was already there when I arrived, Mom nervously arranging and rearranging snacks that no one was eating, Dad pretending to read the newspaper, Allison checking her phone, and Mason slouched in an armchair. Nancy wasn't present, which I appreciated. This needed to be just our immediate family. "Thanks for coming," I began once we were all seated in the living room. "I know this is uncomfortable, but it's important. Honey, we've all felt terrible about the misunderstanding," Mom jumped in immediately. "We never meant to hurt you." I took a deep breath. "I need to say something, and I'd appreciate it if you could all just listen without interrupting. Can you do that for me?" They exchanged glances but nodded. What happened with the vacation wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a choice, multiple choices, actually, that excluded me from something I created and paid for. But it's also part of a pattern that's existed in our family for as long as I can remember. I unfolded the paper where I'd written my main points, though I barely needed it. These words had been forming inside me for years. I've always been treated as less important in this family. My time, my feelings, my needs have consistently been considered secondary to everyone else's. When I've expressed hurt about this, I've been told I'm being dramatic or too sensitive. But the truth is, anyone would be hurt by the kind of dismissive treatment I've received. I looked at each of them in turn as I continued. "I love all of you, and I want a relationship with you. But not the kind we've had, where I'm expected to accept whatever scraps of consideration you're willing to give me. I deserve better than that. I deserve to be treated with the same respect and consideration that you show each other." My father cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable. "Brooke, I think you're exaggerating. We've always treated all our children equally." "Dad, please. That's simply not true, and pretending otherwise just invalidates my experience further." I pulled out my phone. I've made a list of incidents just from the past year where my needs or feelings were dismissed in ways you would never dismiss each other's. I read several examples. The time they rescheduled a family dinner when Mason had a last-minute opportunity, but refused to do the same when I had a work conflict. The time Mom helped Allison move, but said she was too busy when I asked for the same help. The way they remembered every detail of my siblings' lives, but rarely asked about mine. And now this vacation, the clearest example yet that my presence in this family is considered optional. Mom was crying quietly now. Dad looked defensive, jaw clenched. Mason stared at the floor. Only Allison met my gaze, her expression unreadable. I'm not saying any of this to hurt you or to make you feel guilty. I'm saying it because if we're going to have a healthy relationship going forward, things need to change. What do you want from us, Brooke? Allison finally asked. First, I want acknowledgement that what happened with the vacation was wrong. Not a misunderstanding, not an oversight, wrong. Second, I want to be repaid for the vacation costs. I saw Dad start to object, but I held up my hand. This isn't about money. It's about accountability. And third, I want all of you to make a genuine effort to change the dynamic going forward. That's not fair, Mason burst out. You're basically saying we're terrible people and terrible family members. No, I'm not. I'm saying our family dynamic is unhealthy, at least as it pertains to me. And all of you have participated in that, just as I have by allowing it to continue for so long. The conversation that followed was difficult, sometimes heated. Dad initially resisted the idea of repayment, suggesting it would commercialize family relationships. Mom kept trying to minimize what had happened, repeating that they'd never intended to hurt me. Mason alternated between defensiveness and attempts at humor to defuse the tension. But as the discussion continued, something unexpected happened. Allison, who I'd expected to be the most resistant, suddenly spoke up. She's right, she said quietly. What we did was wrong. We should never have gone on that trip without her, especially after she paid for everything. The room fell silent. Allison continued, now looking directly at me. And she's right about the pattern too. We do treat her differently. We take advantage of her because she's always been the one who adjusts, who makes things work for everyone else. Her acknowledgement cracked something open in the room. Mom's posture changed, her defensive crossed arms dropping to her lap. I never realized, she said softly. We never meant to make you feel less important, Brooke. I know you didn't mean to, I replied, feeling a lump in my throat. But impact matters more than intention. And the impact has been real. By the end of our 3-hour conversation, we had reached a tentative understanding. Dad agreed to repay me for the vacation, though I could tell it still bothered him. More importantly, everyone had acknowledged, to varying degrees, the reality of the dynamic I'd described. We made specific agreements about communication and consideration going forward, though I knew real change would take time and consistent effort on everyone's part. As I prepared to leave, Allison pulled me aside. I'm sorry, she said simply. Really sorry. Not just about the vacation, but for all of it. I never saw it before, but once you laid it out, I can unsee it now. Her apology, the first genuinely unqualified one I'd received, meant more than I could express. We hugged for the first time in years, not the perfunctory family gathering hug, but a real embrace. Driving home, I felt lighter than I had in weeks, maybe years. I had no illusions that one conversation would fix everything. Old patterns don't disappear overnight, and I knew there would be backsliding and further difficult conversations ahead. But for the first time, I felt like my family had actually seen me. And I had seen myself more clearly too, not as the perpetual people-pleaser willing to accept unequal treatment, but as someone worthy of respect and consideration. When Dad's check arrived in the mail a few days later, I stared at it for a long time before deciding what to do with it. The money had never been the point, but its repayment was symbolic of something important: accountability, a recognition of wrong done, a step toward making things right. After some thought, I decided to use it for something I had never allowed myself before: a vacation planned entirely around my own desires, with no thought to accommodating anyone else's preferences. A trip just for me. 3 weeks after receiving my father's check, I found myself on a ferry heading to Martha's Vineyard, a place I'd always wanted to visit but had never prioritized. Unlike the Outer Banks trip, which I'd planned with everyone else's preferences in mind, this vacation was tailored entirely to my own desires. I'd booked a charming bed and breakfast in Edgartown, within walking distance of both the harbor and the beach, and had a loose itinerary focused on relaxation, good food, and solitude. As the ferry pulled away from the mainland, I felt a weight lifting. For the first time in my adult life, I was taking a real vacation without considering anyone's needs but my own. The realization was both liberating and a little sad. It had taken such a painful experience to give myself this permission. My first day on the island set the tone for the week. I woke early, enjoyed a leisurely breakfast on the inn's veranda, then walked to the beach with nothing but a novel, a towel, and sunscreen. No schedule, no compromises, no one to please but myself. I spent hours reading, swimming, and simply watching the waves, allowing my mind to quiet after weeks of emotional turbulence. That evening, I found myself seated at the bar of a local seafood restaurant, enjoying fresh oysters and chatting with the bartender, a year-round resident named Jake who offered insider tips about the island's hidden gems. "Solo traveler?" he asked as he refilled my wine glass. "Yes," I replied, surprised at how good it felt to say it. "First time, actually." "Well, you picked a perfect spot for it. Vineyard's great for groups, but it's magical when you're on your own time." As Jake introduced me to other regulars at the bar, I found myself opening up about my reason for being there. Not the full family drama, but enough that they understood this trip represented something significant for me. "To finding your own path," toasted an older woman named Eleanor, who told me she'd been coming to the island alone every summer since her divorce 15 years earlier. Sometimes the most important relationship to nurture is the one with yourself. Over the next few days, I fell into a rhythm that felt both indulgent and healing. Mornings on the beach, afternoons exploring shops and galleries or taking bike rides along the island's scenic paths, evenings trying different restaurants or sometimes just bringing takeout back to enjoy on my inn's porch. I took a sailing lesson, something I'd always wanted to try but had never made time for. I signed up for a cooking class focused on local seafood. I spent an entire afternoon in a bookstore, reading snippets from different books until I found several that spoke to me. Each activity felt like a small reclamation, a way of saying, "This is who I am when I'm not trying to please everyone else. This is what brings me joy." On the fourth day, as I was hiking a nature trail near Aquina, my phone buzzed with a text from my mother. "How's your trip going? We miss you." It was the first direct communication since our family meeting, apart from the occasional group text. I sat on a bench overlooking the famous clay cliffs, considering how to respond. In the past, I would have immediately sent a reassuring message, perhaps with an apologetic tone for being away or not in touch. But part of my new boundaries involved not automatically prioritizing others' comfort over my own authentic expression. "The trip is wonderful," I texted back. "Taking some much-needed time for myself. We'll share photos when I'm back home." Simple, honest, not unkind, but also not falling into old patterns of emotional caretaking. Mom's response came quickly. "I'm glad you're enjoying yourself. You deserve it. Take all the time you need." The message surprised me with its respect for my space. Perhaps our conversation had made more of an impact than I'd realized. As the week progressed, I found myself opening up to connections with fellow travelers and locals in a way I rarely did at home. Without my family's dynamics to navigate or my work persona to maintain, I could simply be present, curious, and authentically myself. I had dinner with a retired professor who recommended books that changed my perspective on personal growth. I joined a group sunset kayak tour and exchanged contact information with two women from Seattle who shared my love of indie films. These interactions, brief though they were, reminded me that connection didn't have to come at the cost of compromise. Healthy relationships, whether familial, friendly, or romantic, should expand rather than diminish us. On my last evening on the island, I walked along the beach at sunset, reflecting on the transformation that had begun with such pain, but had led to unexpected growth. The vacation betrayal had forced me to confront not just how my family treated me, but how I allowed myself to be treated, in all areas of my life. I realized I'd been operating from a scarcity mindset, believing that any attention or affection had to be earned through self-sacrifice and accommodation. The past few weeks had shown me a different possibility, that I could set boundaries, honor my own needs, and still maintain connections, perhaps healthier ones than before. When I returned home, I found a package waiting at my apartment door. Inside was a framed photo of me as a little girl at the beach, building a sandcastle with determined concentration. A note from Allison was attached. Found this while organizing old albums. Thought you should have it. You've always been stronger and more capable than any of us gave you credit for, including yourself. Love you, sis. The gesture brought tears to my eyes, not just because of the sentiment, but because it showed that Allison, at least, was making a genuine effort to see me differently. Over the following months, my family dynamic shifted in small but significant ways. There were setbacks, of course. Old patterns occasionally reasserted themselves, like when Dad forgot an important work event I'd told him about, or when Mason assumed I would dog sit without asking if I was available. But now, instead of swallowing my disappointment or resentment, I addressed these incidents directly and calmly. Dad, we talked about this. It hurts when you forget things that are important to me. Mason, I'm happy to help with Baxter, but you need to ask rather than assume. Sometimes these boundaries were met with resistance or defensiveness, but increasingly, they were respected. And when they weren't, I had new tools for responding without either exploding in anger or collapsing in hurt. The most surprising change came from my mother. She began calling regularly, not just to talk about herself or my siblings, but to ask thoughtful questions about my life. She remembered details about my work projects and friends. She even visited me in Boston for a weekend, just the two of us, something that had never happened before. I've been doing some reading, she told me over dinner during that visit. About family dynamics and, well, how middle children often feel overlooked. I never wanted you to feel that way, Brooke. I'm trying to do better. Her willingness to examine her own behavior touched me deeply. It didn't erase the past, but it opened the possibility for a different kind of relationship going forward. 6 months after the vacation incident, we attempted our first family gathering since the confrontation, a weekend at my parents' house for Thanksgiving. I approached it with both hope and trepidation, unsure how our new dynamic would hold up under the pressure of old patterns and familiar settings. The weekend wasn't perfect. There were moments of tension, old triggers that surfaced unexpectedly. But there were also new moments of connection and respect. Dad asked my opinion on a financial decision. Mom made sure to include my favorite dishes in the meal. Allison defended me when Mason made a thoughtless comment about my work hours. Small shifts, but meaningful ones. The most profound change, though, wasn't in how my family treated me, but in how I saw myself within the family system. I was no longer the peacekeeper desperately seeking approval. I was simply Brooke, a complex, valuable person worthy of consideration and respect, whether or not it was always given. That realization has changed everything. My relationships outside my family have deepened as I've brought more authenticity and healthy boundaries to friendships and dating. My confidence at work has grown as I've learned to advocate for myself more effectively. And while my family relationships continue to be works in progress, they're evolving in ways I never thought possible. The vacation that never happened, at least not for me, turned out to be the most transformative trip I never took. It forced me to confront painful truths, but in doing so, it set me on a path to genuine self-worth and healthier connections. If you're watching this and something in my story resonates with you, know that you're not alone. Family dynamics can be incredibly painful, especially when they're built on unequal value and consideration. But change is possible. It begins with seeing the truth clearly, even when it hurts. It continues with setting boundaries, even when it's uncomfortable. And it flourishes when you begin to truly believe, not just intellectually, but in your heart, that you deserve to be treated with respect and care. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family members? What helped you find the courage to stand up for yourself? Share your experiences in the comments below. And if my story helped you in any way, please like and subscribe for more honest conversations about family dynamics, personal growth, and the messy, beautiful journey of becoming our authentic selves. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, you are worthy of respect and consideration, exactly as you are.